This phone in front of me is running a full Linux operating system, not Android, not iOS. Actual Linux, the same operating system running on servers, supercomputers, and most of the internet. It makes phone calls. It sends texts. I can plug it into a monitor and it becomes a desktop computer. And I didn't build this in a lab or pay some exotic company for specialty hardware. I built it because Android, the operating system that was supposed to be the open alternative to Apple's locked garden, quietly crossed a line in 2026 that I couldn't ignore anymore. That line has a date attached to it, a policy reference number, and a coalition of 37 organizations fighting to reverse it. Let me explain exactly what happened. Android has always existed in two forms, and most people don't realize they've only ever used one of them. There's the Android that Google controls, the one on your phone, the one connected to Google Play, Google mobile services, and the entire advertising infrastructure that makes search and YouTube so profitable. And then there's AOSP, the Android Open Source Project, which is the public foundation that Android was built on, the version anyone can access, modify, build upon, and redistribute. AOSP is why Graphene OS exists. It's why Lineage OS can install modern Android on a phone the manufacturer abandoned 3 years ago. It's why privacy-focused alternatives to the commercial Google stack were possible at all. AOSP was the promise that Android was genuinely open in a way iOS would never be. That promise is being actively dismantled, and the pace is accelerating. In January 2026, Google updated the main page of the Android Open Source Project with a notice that sent a wave of alarm through the developer and privacy communities. The exact language is worth knowing. Effective in 2026, to align with our trunk stable development model and ensure platform stability for the ecosystem, we will publish source code to AOSP in Q2 and Q4. What that means in practice is that Google is cutting AOSP code releases from 4 times a year to twice. On the surface, this sounds like an administrative restructuring. Beneath the surface, it means that every time Google ships a pixel update in Q1 or Q3, which it will continue to do, the source code underlying that update will remain private for up to 3 months before it becomes available to the open source community. If Google fixes a fundamental Bluetooth vulnerability in February, Lineage OS users won't see that fix until the next AOSP drop. If there's a critical audio driver flaw patched in March, anyone running an alternative OS built on AOSP faces a 3-month window where they are knowingly running unpatched software that Google has already fixed on its own devices. Tom Hallwada, editor of OS News, didn't mince words in his response. AOSP is already on life support, and with this latest move, Google is firmly gripping the plug. Commenters on The Register, where the story was also covered, used a phrase that's been attached to Microsoft's historical strategy of neutralizing competition through controlled integration: embrace, extend, extinguish. And the AOSP change, alarming as it is not even the most aggressive move Google has made in this period. In August 2025, Google announced what it's calling the Android Developer Verification Program. The details deserve your full attention because they represent something genuinely without precedent in the Android ecosystem. Starting March 2026, and with hard regional enforcement beginning in September 2026 across pilot markets including Brazil, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand, any developer who wants their app to run on a certified Android device must register centrally with Google. This is not a Play Store submission requirement. This is not a review or approval process for apps entering a curated store. This is a requirement that applies to every app installed on certified Android hardware, including apps that are side-loaded directly, apps that never touch the Play Store, apps distributed through F-Droid, and apps created by small developers working independently without any commercial relationship with Google. And the specific requirements of this registration are striking. Developers must hand over their private app signing key, which is the cryptographic credential that proves an app's authenticity, and a full list of all current and future application identifiers. The Keep Android Open Coalition, a group backed by over 37 organizations, including the Electronic Frontier Foundation, F-Droid, and the Free Software Foundation, published a response that put it plainly. This is not a developer account sign-up. This is comprehensive surveillance of the software development ecosystem, handed to a single private corporation. F-Droid board member Mark Prudhomo estimated that 90 to 95% of Android developers oppose this requirement. His organization's entire existence depends on being able to distribute open source apps without registration, without key disclosure, and without submitting to Google's verification process. The August 2025 announcement put F-Droid's future on certified Android devices directly in question. There's a promised bypass mechanism called the Advanced Flow that was supposed to give power users and tinkerers an alternative route around these requirements. It has failed to appear in either the Android 16 or Android 17 betas. The gates are closing, and the key that was supposed to let certain users exit is missing from the lock. Meanwhile, Samsung's decision to remove the OEM unlock toggle from newer Galaxy devices, a decision enforced through the One UI 8 update, means that even the option of installing Lineage OS on a mainstream Galaxy phone has been removed for most users. Combine the AOSP slowdown, the developer verification program, and the bootloader lockdowns spreading across mainstream hardware, and you get a picture of an operating system that started as open and is methodically becoming closed. Not all at once, not with a single dramatic announcement, but through a series of individually defensible policy changes that, assembled together, produce a platform where what you install, who wrote it, and how it was distributed are all subject to approval from one company. So I bought a PinePhone Pro, and I installed Linux on it. Not Android with a privacy modification, not a de-googled AOSP build, actual Linux running directly on phone hardware, with no Android compatibility layer anywhere in the stack. And here's what I want to explain clearly before going any further. This was not a choice I made because I thought it would be more convenient. It wasn't. It's a choice I made because the alternative, staying on a platform that is actively removing its own openness while I continue complaining about it on that same platform, started to feel incoherent. But the experience itself was far more usable than I expected going in, and it has implications that go beyond anything I anticipated. Let me explain what the Linux phone ecosystem actually looks like in 2026, because this is where a lot of coverage gets either too optimistic or too dismissive. There are several operating systems designed for Linux phones, each with different trade-offs and different target users. postmarketOS is the most expansive of these. It supports over 720 device models as of February 2026, including the PinePhone, PinePhone Pro, Google Pixel 3a, OnePlus 6T, and Fairphone 4. It's built on Alpine Linux, which is an extremely lightweight base, and it runs on hardware that commercial manufacturers abandoned years ago. The philosophy of postmarketOS, explicitly stated in the project's goals, is that phones should have software support measured in decades rather than years. When a manufacturer decides your hardware is end of life, postmarketOS says that's the manufacturer's problem, not the hardware's. The limitation is that on the vast majority of its 720 plus supported devices, postmarketOS doesn't support cellular voice calls or SMS because modern modem firmware is proprietary, and integrating it into a truly open stack involves legal and technical complexities that aren't resolved for most hardware. These devices work as privacy-focused internet terminals, using Matrix, SIP, or Signal's native Linux application for communication. That's a real limitation, and I won't minimize it. Ubuntu Touch, maintained by the UB ports community, is the more polished end of the Linux phone spectrum. It releases monthly updates, supports the PinePhone, PinePhone Pro, and Volaphone X23, and added official support for the Fairphone 5 in December 2025. On well-supported hardware, Ubuntu Touch handles calls, SMS, Wi-Fi, GPS, and Bluetooth headset audio reliably. It has a consistent interface called Lemiri that provides the most recognizable smartphone experience available in the Linux phone space. One expert writing for Factually in a May 2026 review was direct. For most users in 2024 through 2026 who want a usable Linux phone without becoming a developer, Ubuntu Touch on a well-supported device is the choice. postmarketOS is for people who value mainline kernels, want to run desktop applications, or are building toward longer-term hardware sustainability and can handle a steeper learning curve. The distinction is real, and choosing the wrong one for your technical comfort level will produce frustration that has nothing to do with Linux phones being fundamentally unusable. Then there's Sailfish OS from Jolla, the only commercially supported Linux mobile operating system in the space. Jolla offers paid support contracts, which puts Sailfish in a different category from the volunteer-run projects. It achieves something that many other Linux phone OS projects haven't managed: reliable VoLTE support through licensed proprietary modem firmware, which is why carrier compatibility is stronger on Sailfish than on most alternatives. The trade-off is that Sailfish is partly proprietary, maintaining commercial middleware alongside its open source base, which puts it in a philosophically ambiguous position for users whose primary motivation is escaping proprietary software entirely. Jolla's upcoming hardware, the C2, was anticipated by the community but remained unshipped through mid-2026. Now, let me describe what actually happened when I set up the PinePhone Pro with a Phosh interface, because reviewers from April 2026 documented the experience in terms that match my own. Phosh is a GNOME-based shell designed for mobile use, built around gestures, designed to feel intuitive at small scale. It does. The learning curve is primarily about what's missing compared to what you're used to, not about the interface being confusing. Basic phone functions worked. VoLTE worked for calls. SMS and MMS messaging were reliable. Wi-Fi and mobile data connected and stayed connected. The calendar, contacts, and clock apps are functional. Email through Geary worked. Web browsing through Firefox on the desktop Linux side worked, though it's slower than a current generation phone and benefits from not running a dozen background processes simultaneously. One reviewer's description from April 2026 captures it accurately. No mysterious background processes sending data to unknown servers. The notification system is clean and straightforward. On a device running commercial Android, Activity Manager logs routinely show dozens of background processes active at any given time. On Phosh, you see what you ran, you know what's running. But then there's the feature that genuinely surprised me and that represents something neither iOS nor Android can offer in any form: Convergence. I plugged the PinePhone Pro into a USB-C hub. The hub connected to a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse. And the phone's interface transformed into a full Linux desktop. Not a phone interface stretched to fill a large screen. Not an approximation of desktop computing. A real Linux desktop, running real Linux applications, with the phone sitting in the hub, providing the processing, the storage, and the operating system. A reviewer documenting this in April 2026 was clear about how significant the shift is. Convergence is no longer just a gimmick in 2026. It's not seamless in the way Apple's or Google's marketing would make it look. You won't use it the way you use a real workstation. The processing power of the PinePhone Pro is not a high-performance desktop, but the principle it demonstrates, that a single device can be your phone when you're mobile and your computer when you're at a desk, using the same files, the same applications, and the same operating system throughout, is real and functional in 2026 in ways it wasn't even 2 years earlier. Applications in the convergent Linux ecosystem, those built using libnd or libadwaita, automatically adapt their user interface between mobile and desktop contexts. A developer building for desktop Linux now writes code that, at minimal additional cost, also runs appropriately on a Linux phone. SitePoint noted in a February 2026 analysis of postmarketOS and F-Droid development that for teams already targeting desktop Linux, the marginal cost of supporting Linux mobile drops close to zero. The ecosystem is self-reinforcing in ways the early years of Linux on phones were not. As more developers target convergent interfaces, more applications become usable on phones. As more applications become usable on phones, the case for Linux phones to ordinary users strengthens. Now, I have to be honest about what doesn't work, because a script that glosses over the gaps is more of an advertisement than an honest evaluation. The camera is the most significant limitation. Only Sailfish OS and Ubuntu Touch offer usable camera interfaces on select devices. postmarketOS defaults to still image-only capture on over 80% of its supported phone models. Even where cameras work, they don't work to the standard of a current Android or iOS flagship. GPS lock times are slow. Bluetooth audio, beyond basic headset pairing, is inconsistently supported depending on the OS and device combination. On the Fairphone 5, which became officially supported by both Ubuntu Touch and postmarketOS in late 2025 and early 2026, camera autofocus is inconsistent in low light conditions, and NFC payment APIs are not exposed to user applications. You cannot tap to pay on a Linux phone. That's not a minor annoyance for people who rely on contactless payment for daily transactions. Banking applications are the other category where the gap is real and currently unresolved for most users. Banking apps that depend on Google Play services or device attestation APIs don't work out of the box. There's a workaround through Waydroid, which runs a lightweight Android container inside the Linux environment and allows some Android apps to run, but this is technically complex, varies by bank and country, and requires running the Android compatibility layer you were partially trying to escape in the first place. Some banking apps work through Waydroid with microG installed in the container. Most don't. If your bank's app is essential to your daily financial life and has no web interface you can use instead, a Linux phone as a full-time sole device is currently impractical. The carrier situation in the United States deserves specific attention because it's more complicated than in most other countries. T-Mobile and Mint Mobile work best with Linux phones because of their relatively open VoLTE profiles. Verizon requires custom APN and IMS settings that are often undocumented and unsupported outside certified Android. AT&T blocks non-certified IMEI ranges entirely, meaning a Linux phone on AT&T in the United States is currently, as of 2026, not functional for standard cellular service without significant technical workarounds. This is not a software problem, it's a carrier policy problem, and it significantly shapes which Linux phone options are practical for US users specifically. All of this should be held alongside the alternative. The alternative, staying on Android, means operating on a platform that is in the process of requiring developer verification before side-loaded applications can run on certified hardware. It means operating on a platform where AOSP, the open source foundation that made alternatives possible, now publishes updates twice a year instead of 4 times. creating a 3-month window of opacity where Google's proprietary devices receive patches that community alternatives cannot access. It means operating on hardware where, for a growing proportion of mainstream devices, including recent Samsung Galaxy phones, the bootloader cannot be unlocked, meaning the user is permanently locked to whatever operating system the manufacturer chose to ship. None of these changes happened in a single dramatic announcement. Each was individually framed as a security improvement, a stability enhancement, or platform simplification. Together, they describe a systematic narrowing of the space available for alternatives to exist. The Keep Android Open Coalition is fighting this narrowing through advocacy, through the Free Droid Warn Library campaign that alerts users to platform closure, and through the growing discussion of a hard fork, a version of Android built from AOSP that strips Google's certification requirements entirely and creates a genuinely open alternative at the operating system level, rather than just the App Store level. Whether that fork happens, and whether it achieves sufficient adoption to matter, remains an open question. What is not an open question is the direction of travel on the commercial Android platform. The direction is toward more control, less transparency, and fewer alternatives. The AOSP release page says twice a year now. The Developer Verification Program enforcement begins in September 2026. The advanced flow bypass hasn't appeared in Android 16 or 17. The gates are closing. And so the PinePhone Pro sits on my desk running Phosh, receiving monthly security updates from a community of volunteers who believe that a phone is hardware you own and an operating system is software you control. When I plug it into my monitor, it runs a desktop. When I unplug it, it's a phone again. The same files, the same applications, the same operating system throughout. No Google Play services running in the background, no advertising identifier, no developer verification requirement, no AOSP release schedule dictating which security patches I can access. The trade-offs are real, and I've described them honestly. The camera isn't what I'm used to. Banking apps require workarounds. AT&T isn't an option in the United States, but for the core functions of a phone and the core principle of owning the device you paid for, it works in 2026 in ways it didn't convincingly work in 2023. The question isn't whether a Linux phone is ready for everyone. It isn't. The question is whether the trajectory of where Android is going, combined with the trajectory of where Linux phones are going, makes 2026 the year when at least some of the people who've been watching this space should stop watching and start installing. Tom Holwerda said Google is gripping the plug on AOSP. He's right. But what he's gripping the plug on is a specific version of Android's openness that was always somewhat theoretical, always dependent on Google's continued goodwill, always one policy change away from being removed. What the Linux phone community is building is something that doesn't require anyone's goodwill to continue existing. The kernel is public. The source code is public. The hardware schematics on the Librem 5 are public. The project goals are written down and they say, explicitly, that phones should be supported for decades. That's a fundamentally different relationship with technology than the one you have with a phone running an operating system whose source code is now private for 6 months at a time. And whether that relationship is worth the current friction of a missing banking app or a slow GPS lock is a calculation each person has to make for themselves. But it's a calculation worth making now, because in another year or two, the options available on the commercial Android platform are going to be more limited than they are today. The window for choosing something different is open. It's narrower than it was in 2023. And the question is whether you want to decide what's on your phone or whether you're comfortable letting Google decide for you.